Ever since the iPhone X, Apple's iPhones have been instantly recognizable due to the notch, a little black cutout on top of the display, hiding the selfie camera and Face ID components. The iPhone 14 Pro and the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which I'm holding in my hand, the notch has changed. Bye bye notch, hello Dynamic Island. Here's how the Dynamic Island works. When certain apps perform certain actions, they show up in the Dynamic Island, which changes shape and appearance as it happens. So if I start the music app and play a song and then minimize it, it'll get swallowed in the Dynamic Island, which now shows a little album artwork icon and a tiny little music visualization icon. If I then go and start the timer and then minimize that, it also shows up in the Dynamic Island, which now splits into two bubbles. Now if I touch a bubble, it'll launch the corresponding app, and if I touch and hold, then it shows a little widget like this, giving you an overview of what the app is doing. The Dynamic Island is only active when an app is performing something in the background, like playing music, or when the phone wants to notify you of something, like an incoming call. Overall, I love the Dynamic Island. It looks cool, it's pretty intuitive, and most importantly, it makes you forget that the entire thing is there to hide the selfie camera and the Face ID components. Along with the Dynamic Island, another big new feature in the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max is the always-on display, which keeps the screen from going black when it goes asleep. Now, we've seen this on other phones many times, and typically you get a clock and maybe little tidbits of information on the display when it's asleep. But Apple has done this a little bit differently. If you look closely, you'll see that all of the widgets, everything that's there on the display remains visible when it goes to sleep. Even the music app. Users will certainly worry about always on display affecting battery life. I've tested the phone out with and without always on, and I didn't really notice that big of a difference. This is because Apple has employed a number of technologies to make this less of a battery drain. For example, if you place the phone face down on a surface, it'll go black. Also, if you have an Apple Watch that's paired to the phone and you move away from the phone, the screen will also go black, thus preserving battery life. I'm not exactly in love with the always-on display. It feels odd to have the phone showing you something all of the time. However, the feature is easily turned off in the settings, so you can't really fault Apple for giving you the option to turn it on if you like. As for the back of the phone itself, the most noticeable change will be the new colors, which are white, gold, space black, and deep purple. White is a little bit whiter than before, gold is a little bit yellow than before. The black has this jet black stainless steel frame, and this is the deep purple, which is more or less purple depending on the lighting. It's going to be pretty purple in daylight. In lower light, it's kind of subdued. Now, on the inside, the new iPhones come with the new Apple A16 Bionic chip, which you will not notice in real life. That's not because the new chip isn't fast, it's because the last year's chip, the A15 Bionic, was also pretty fast, so you won't notice much of a difference in real life usage. However, the new chip powers a lot of the new features, including the always-on display and the Dynamic Island. We don't know how much RAM the new phones have, but I never felt like I needed more. When it comes to storage, you get 4 options just like on last year's iPhones. It starts with 128 gigabytes and goes all the way to 1 terabyte, which should be plenty even for the most demanding of users. Another major change on the new iPhone is the new main camera, which now has a 48 megapixel sensor. It allows you to do several cool things. First of all, it gives the phone better low light performance because the information from a 48 megapixel image is combined to get a 12 megapixel image. Obviously, you can also use it just to take 48 megapixel photos, which are surprisingly good. There's no degradation, Compared to a regular photo, you just get tons of more detail, more clarity with that photo. Yet another new feature enabled by the new 48 megapixel sensor is 2x zoom. Apple already offered 1x and 3x magnification on the old phones. Now you have another option in the middle. It's basically just a crop out of a digital image taken by the 48 megapixel camera. But in real life, if you zoom in, you won't notice that big of a difference between optical and digital zoom. A cool new video feature is called Action Mode. It allows you to take video in situations when your hand is shaking. I tried it out and I didn't really notice that big of a difference between regular video image stabilization and the action mode. Then I tried it again, really moving my head a lot, and the action mode performed a little better. The result is going to be pretty good. It's not going to be like having a pro gimbal, but you'll get a pretty good video out of it. Two new features that you'll never want to use, but you'll be happy that they're there, are called crash detection and emergency SOS. Crash detection uses various sensors on the iPhone to detect whether you've been in a car crash. And if so, the phone can offer you to dial 911, or you can even call the emergency services itself. Emergency SOS allows you to send an emergency message when you're in the wilderness and there's absolutely no reception. The way it works is you go through a short survey asking you a couple of questions about the nature of your emergency, and then you point the phone at the sky looking for a satellite. After a couple of seconds, your emergency SOS will be sent. One thing that the new phones do not have, at least in the United States, is a physical SIM slot. Now this is a European version of the phone, which has a physical SIM slot, but you will not get this in the United States. I've tried both versions of the phone. I've set it up with an eSIM and a physical SIM, and it worked well in both scenarios. It should also be mentioned that Apple's new iPhones still come with the Lightning port. Now, there's nothing wrong with the Lightning port, but given that basically everybody else, including Apple and its other devices, has switched to USB-C, I'd really like to be able to just use one cable for all my devices. Overall, I will say that Apple has managed to innovate where other smartphone makers did not. The dynamic island, Apple turned one of the most annoying traits of modern phones, which is the cutout for the selfie camera, into a desirable feature that you really want to have. With emergency SOS and crash detection, it says a lot about Apple's certainty into the robustness of its tech to be able to offer these features on its most popular devices. The always-on display and 48 megapixel camera are features that we've seen on other phones, but Apple also tweaked things just enough to make this compelling. Unless you really love the notch or must have a physical SIM card, the new iPhones don't really have any downsides compared to the previous generation of phones. So the new iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max are worth the upgrade.